Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Now, in this episode, we are going to look at, very briefly, a weapon system that, when it first appeared on the prospective battlefield, that it was going to be a game changer. It was going to be a weapon system that could change the very idea, the very concept and strategies behind air-to-air warfare. And what am I talking about? I'm referring to the AIM-54 Phoenix. Now, this missile was originally developed back in the 1960s by Hughes Corporation, and it eventually became Raytheon. And this missile was deployed in active U.S. service in the early 70s and remained in service until the early 2000s. So it served quite some time in the U.S. Air Force. Now, the stats on this missile, it would appear on the surface to be a quote-unquote cheat code missile, right? We know what that is, right? A cheat code? Well, same thing with the Phoenix. The Phoenix had a range at the time of deployment in excess of 100 miles. It was a beyond visual range missile that could engage and destroy fighter-sized targets in excess of 100 miles from its launch point. Now, one other country used this weapon system as well with its main launching platform, the F-14 Tomcat. Now, does anybody want to take a wild guess which country out of the two countries that have used this weapon system has had the most success using this weapon system in air-to-air combat? Well, on the surface, you would say, well, of course, it would have to be the United States, right? I mean, obviously, the weapon system was developed by the United States. It armed a fleet of up to 700 F-14 Tomcats. And obviously, the United States would probably claim the largest number of air-to-air kills utilizing the AIM-54 Phoenix, right? Well, you would be wrong. The country that has the most air-to-air combat kills using the AIM-54 Phoenix is not the United States. In fact, and this is going to be hard to believe, you could argue, and it could be claimed, that the United States has never shot down an opposing aircraft with an AIM-54 Phoenix. The use of this weapon by U.S. naval aviators had become incredibly unpopular. F-14 pilots, at the close of the utilization of this weapon system, did not believe this missile could shoot down air-to-air targets or opposing aircraft. It was used. They attempted to shoot down aircraft. Now, obviously, once fired from extremely long ranges, it would at times make opposing Iraqi Air Force pilots flee the battlefield. It was used against Libyan fighter pilots. But it is believed that the United States Navy has never scored an air-to-air kill with a AIM-54 Phoenix. The country, the nation state that has achieved the most air-to-air kills, believe it or not, with an AIM-54 Phoenix is the Islamic Republic of Iran. Yes, Iran. Iran was given a number, obviously, of F-14 Tomcats, and one of the weapon systems that the Iranians were handed over to use by these F-14 Tomcats was the Phoenix long-range missile system. It is reported that Iran may have shot down anywhere between 50 and 60 Iraqi aircraft using the AIM-54 Phoenix. In fact, there was one occasion, I believe it was either 1980 or 1981, I believe it was 1981, in which a flight of 4 Iraqi MiG-23s, they were flying very close together, and they were engaged by a single AIM-54 Phoenix fired by an Iranian F-14 Tomcat, which destroyed, one missile destroyed 3 Iraqi MiG-23s and damaged the 4th. These AIM-54 Phoenix missiles carry very large warheads, so a detonation near a flight of 4 that were flying very close together, the shrapnel from that missile damaged 3 of those aircraft enough where they were essentially shot down out of the sky, and then the 4th had to return because of damage. But the United States, in the use of the AIM-54, not one reported air-to-air kill. Not a one. Now, if it had come to a hot war where the U.S. was having to fire dozens upon dozens of these weapon systems, I think eventually they may have figured the weapon system out and made modifications to it to make it more accurate and to give it more capability in air-to-air combat. But unfortunately for this missile, it was a big waste of the taxpayer dollars that, in all probability, at the end of the day, probably benefited the Iranians more than the citizenry of the United States, unfortunately. In fact, we know that the Iranians liked this missile, and they have since developed a clone of this missile that they are using today. They have reverse engineered this missile and are using a weapon system with possibly comparable technology. The issue the Iranians had with these missiles was its battery, and it took a special type of battery to operate this missile, and the Iranians unfortunately did not have the ability, especially going from the 80s, 90s into the early 2000s, did not have the ability to attain these batteries to use in these Phoenix missiles. And thus they had to obtain them on the black market, in some cases paying up to $10,000 for a single battery. Now, the Iranians, because they like this weapon system, initiated a program of their own to build their own batteries to operate the Phoenix missile. So while this missile system was hated by U.S. naval aviation and eventually was retired from service, the Iranians to this day use the long-range Phoenix air-to-air missile, beyond visual range missile. So on one hand, you have the fleecing of America, in which a weapon system was designed, deployed, and essentially was never effectively used, costing the American taxpayer who knows how much money, who knows how many hundreds of millions of dollars were spent on this weapon system, And the most successful user of this weapon was the Islamic Republic of Iran. And now you know the rest of the story. Have a good day.